So we're grateful for you to spend your time with us this morning. We're going to do a couple of things. Those of you who have participated in our community conversations before will be used to us doing this as webinar form, where there is a presentation and then a panel discussion. We've realized that we like the chat, but we want to invite you into the conversation in a different way. So today, what we're going to try is we're going to still do a presentation, and we're looking forward to that. Then we'll have a panel discussion in which the chat will still be open. And then we're going to actually go to breakout groups and invite you all to have some conversation as well. A real quick, feedback into the whole room for that group learning, and then we'll be on with our day and our way. So grateful for all of you to take your time out here and to be panelists. And so I'm gonna, before we go into the presentation, I'm gonna invite our panelists here to introduce themselves one by one. I'll begin with myself. I'm Kevin Ressler. I'm the president and CEO of United Way of Lancaster County. And I'm grateful to be here both as a little bit of a participant and facilitator, but more honestly, as a community member who is looking at how do we solve these challenges that we see for our neighbors, those in my neighborhood who would like to work but don't always have the transportation to where the jobs are, or the childcare accessibility to be able to go out and work, or the wages don't make sense, or they don't have the training for the way. All these things I hear in my neighborhood and I want to do something about, and don't feel, even in my role at United Way of Lancaster County, that I'm always as able to tangibly feel. I want to be able to point people to resources and know what's out there. So I'm grateful. I'm going to invite Scott to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Fiore, president of Tristar. I currently serve as the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Lancaster Chamber. I also serve on the board of the Lancaster Cleft Palate Clinic and on the board of the Affiliated Staffing Group, which is a network of independent staffing services in the United States and Canada. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go around my little Brady Bunch here square. So Tom Baldridge.
Morning, everybody. I'm Tom Baldridge, President and CEO of the Lancaster Chamber.
And Dr. Damaris Rao.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Damaris Rao, the Superintendent for the School District of Lancaster. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Brian Lois.
Kevin, thanks for setting this up. Brian Lois, Senior Director of HR Operations at HI. Just excited to be a part of the panel.
Marilyn Barbosa.
Good morning, Marlene Barbosa, Director at the Central Program under the Spanish American Civic Association.
Thank you. And Vanessa Philbert.
Oh, just like that, I disappeared on you, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. I'm trying to make sure folks are awake. It's Friday, all the good things.
Yeah, keep it mixed up.
Yeah, keep it up. So good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa Philbert. I'm the CEO of our local community action partnership.
Thank you. And Selena Coachman.
Good morning, I'm Selena Coachman. I'm Vice President of Talent Sustainability, Diversity, and Inclusion at Armstrong. I am a 6-month resident of Lancaster County, and I am, of course, excited to learn more about my community, how I can serve in the community, and of course, my heart bleeds, as much like Kevin said, for those around us who are having challenges during this time, and I'm happy to be here to discuss more about this.
Thank you. And with all those, we have our last individual here, Valerie Hatfield, who is going to give us the presentation. So I'm going to invite Valerie for you to introduce yourself. The rest of us will drop off of our cameras until after that concludes. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Valerie Hatfield, and my title is Director of Compliance and Business Engagement at the Lancaster County Workforce Development Board. So I'm going to go ahead and start our presentation. So thank you so much for having me today to share some information about the current state of our workforce. The Lancaster County Workforce Development Board has been an organization in Lancaster County since 1999, and our mission is to align fiscal resources and provide strategic direction to Lancaster County job seekers and employers. One way we do this is by sharing data to help our community make informed decisions. So today we're going to focus on the effects of the pandemic on unemployment and hiring practices within Lancaster County. So I want to start by talking about some of the main factors that are affecting our labor force. Sorry, one second. So today's agenda is going to focus on the labor shortage we're facing, and I'm going to break that down for you. A look at what types of jobs are available right now in Lancaster County and some strategies we can implement to help connect people to the labor market and help employers find, or more importantly, grow the talent that they need. I hope the presentation today helps to answer the question that I've heard a lot recently from business community, our community leaders, and even workforce professionals. Why are so many people in unemployment, yet there are so many job openings? What can we do? So let's start by talking about some of the main factors that are affecting our labor force. I chose the picture of this person looking like they're exploding because that is really what happened to our entire labor force. I think most of us, even economists, predicted that as vaccine availability was widespread and things opened back up, that we would return to normal. However, the pandemic has proven to shake up our labor force in so many ways, some of which are here to stay. I'll talk a little bit more about the decline of labor force participation, but things like e-commerce, remote work, automation, and the pressure to increase wages all have a lasting impact on our workforce. And they're prompting us to do things differently, even than we thought about 2 years ago. For those who aren't as familiar, I wanted to dissect the labor market a little here to understand exactly what makes up the labor force. The labor force is made up of two groups of people, the employed and the unemployed. Sometimes unemployed can seem a little misleading, as some people who are collecting unemployment compensation may be working part-time or less than their normal hours. In addition, not everyone who is unemployed is collecting unemployment compensation. I wanted to focus on labor force participation as a whole because that really is the big picture. The graph on the left shows the current labor force participation at 277,000 people as of August 2021. The call out before that is where we were right before the fallout of the pandemic in February 2020. As you can see, our labor force has declined by almost 13,000 people. The last time we experienced a labor market this tight was back in 2016. This has a much greater impact on our workforce than the unemployment number alone. Our work is twofold. How do we attract people who left the labor market back? And for those who are searching for work, considered unemployed, what can we do to connect them to the available jobs? The chart on the right shows the trends for unemployment for the same time period. I'm going to touch base on the characteristics of the unemployed here in a minute, but we have done a really good job at getting the rate down to a healthier level. There's no official percentage, but most agree that an unemployment rate under 4% is full employment. So the big question is, why the mass exodus from the workforce? Of course, there's a lot more than 3 reasons, but none of these will be shocking to you. I'm going to touch on our aging labor force in a bit and how the age of our workforce is presenting huge challenges for us in the next few years. But I want to make special note of 2 populations. The first is the baby boomers. Nationally, baby boomers were retiring at a rate of 2 million per year. However, last year, over 3 million exited the workforce. The accelerated rate of our most skilled and experienced workers has left a huge hole of talent for many employers. We're facing another 70,000 retirements locally in the next 7 years. The other category is females. As we know, females left the workforce in record numbers, and we don't think all of them are going to return. They currently make up the majority of unemployment claims in Lancaster. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into our current workers who are collecting unemployment compensation. Pennsylvania does not collect demographics on all the unemployed people, but they do for those who are on unemployment compensation. The data here is collected from the Center for Workforce Information and Analysis, and they have a dashboard for the public that you can view this information. I thought it would be interesting to compare pre-pandemic unemployment to the characteristics of the current unemployed. So what we can see here is Females make up the majority of all current claims, where traditionally males accounted for more claims. Although manufacturing was the top industry pre and current, the second and third largest industry sectors are very different this time around. That means the unemployed today have vastly different skill sets than those pre-pandemic. The age of the unemployed is also drastically different, with a much younger population facing unemployment. This also attributes to less skills and experience for this set of job seekers. Lastly, I wanted to share how unemployment is disproportionately affects those of color. Looking at the graph on the bottom right, we can see that as a percentage of the population of the county, Hispanics, Blacks, Asian, and those identified as unknown, which are 2 or more races, are experiencing much higher rates of unemployment than those who identify as white. I touched briefly earlier on how the silver tsunami is real and it's here. But the other important factor, and is why workforce professionals are raising the alarm, is that we're facing a much longer term issue of declined labor force participation rate due to the slow population growth. The chart on the right shows the shocking shortfall we're facing of the different age cohorts. What are we doing to transfer all the knowledge and skill of these older workers to the existing workforce? Right now is the prime opportunity. I don't know about you, but I swear that that's Tom Baldridge riding that silver tsunami wave right there. So congratulations on your retirement, Tom. So we talked a lot about the labor force, but I wanted to share insight on the types of jobs that are currently posted online in Lancaster County. Earlier this week, there were over 10,000 active job postings with 2.6 thousand employers. A little over half of those jobs are full-time. I can't spend a lot of time on wages today, even though I'd love to dig deeper into that, but I'm referencing the MIT living wage calculator here. It's a common tool that we reference to determine a living wage by county or state. For Lancaster County, for example, an adult with no children requires an hourly wage of at least $13.26 an hour to just afford the basics. If you add a child, it increases to $27.27 an hour. There were 439 positions offering less than a living wage for any adult in Lancaster. There's also another 1,200 jobs advertising less than $15 an hour. Another interesting fact is a query I did found 1,400 jobs offering the availability to work remotely. And lastly, there's only 226 jobs requiring a specific certification in the job posting or an associate's or bachelor's degree. On the next slide, I'm going to break down the education required for these jobs. So back to the question of why aren't the unemployed filling these open positions that are advertised? One reason is called a skill mismatch. There's multiple types of skill mismatch, including a skill shortage, an over or under education, and one that I think is interesting, which is a horizontal mismatch, where the type or field of education or skills is inappropriate for the job. It's important for employers to evaluate the skills and education for the job and make sure they're not requiring too little or too less. So the chart on the right breaks down the education required from those 10,000 active job postings and the educational attainment level of our community. One thing we can see here is that the majority of jobs require less than a college degree, but are unspecified. The sum college is the attainment level of people who have more than a high school diploma, but less than an associate's degree. What are those unspecified requirements employers are looking for? Is it so many years of work experience? Is it a certification or industry credential? Untangling this mystery is the key to ensuring we're preparing and training our workers to meet the changing needs of employers. Educating job seekers on the skills required for tomorrow's employment will reduce the underemployment that so many people in Lancaster face, which is working in jobs that don't best utilize their skills or ability. So I found this picture on LinkedIn earlier this week as I was preparing this presentation, and I just thought that it really seemed appropriate for our conversation. Our traditional way of learning and hiring is all upside down. How can we start valuing people's worth and abilities more? And how can we make sure our education and training systems are able to move with the speed of business? Lastly, how can we make sure there's equitable accessibility for all workers to continuous learning that they need to move up in their career journey? So this information here can be found also on that CWIA website, and it's called the Top 50 Job Skills Report. These highlight the tools and technologies needed in jobs, specifically in Lancaster County through 2026. I listed the 6 skills that are required in 50% or more of the annual demand in Lancaster. But in reality, the top 15 skills were all digital. The 16th, in case anyone is wondering, was using a screwdriver. But it's critical that we can ensure that our workforce is trained in these skills and that we can once again keep training updated as skills evolve. I hope that most of you have seen or heard of Career Ready Lancaster, but if you haven't, I invite you to explore careerreadylancaster.com. CRL for short is a collaboration that brings educators and business together at the table with the support of community-based organizations for the shared mission of educating people about the types of careers available here in Lancaster and what kind of training is required for those careers. It's all about connecting education and business to work together to tackle some of the issues we're facing today and to create what we call career pathways. Career pathways may sound like an elusive term that just describes the picture of a career ladder, but they're much more than that. Career pathways are really a series of structured and connected education programs that enable students and job seekers, often while they're working, to advance over time to better high-paying jobs. Pathways can be developed to meet local needs, and they're designed to create opportunities for some of the populations we're talking about today, such as the unemployed, the underemployed, incumbent workforce, and new and future workers. This strategy helps to produce a steady supply of workers for employers. This partnership is seeking to grow. So if you want to learn more, I encourage you to visit the website and fill out the contact us form, and somebody will be in contact with you. So as we wrap up the presentation today, I thought I'd offer some food for thought that may lend itself to the conversation we're about to have. Does our education and training meet the demands of employers, job seekers, and students? Are we seeking ways to train or upskill our incumbent workforce? Do we have a strong workforce infrastructure and support system, such as transportation, childcare, digital literacy? Are we embracing technology to improve the workforce system? Are we translating work experience into skills? And are we creating career pathways that are a better alignment to our workforce? So lastly, I would be remiss if I did not talk about how our organization is committed to helping some of these address the issues we're talking about. So we're poised to invest $8 million over the next 2 years in Lancaster County in areas such as training, upskilling, and career support. We currently have funds available for Lancaster employers and job seekers to support incumbent worker training, apprenticeship training, on-the-job training, and training for individuals. We also have the support at PA Career Link of Lancaster County for employers and job seekers, and that's all free. We also convene partnerships like Career Ready Lancaster and the Lancaster Berks Construction Connection. We also oftentimes seek out additional funds for special populations and initiatives. We currently have a grant called Transform for $1.5 million. That's to upskill incarcerated individuals at Lancaster County Prison while they're still incarcerated. And we have a grant, thankfully, from BB&T, now Truist, through the Lancaster County Community Foundation to specifically focus on incumbent worker training to diversify occupations. And that funding could support a business up to 100% reimbursement for their training. Lastly, we provide timely and impactful data to the community to make informed decisions. So I put our website on here, also my email address. And on our website, there's a contact us form, and there's also a form to fill out for customized data. So we can collect data on wages, occupation, industries, demographics, all types of things, and that is free of charge also to the community. So I invite you to use that tool. And that really wraps up my conversation today, Kevin, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Val, for that presentation. I'll invite the panelists to come on back here. While they're coming back, I just want to mention that I am wearing purple because today is Wear Purple Day to raise awareness for domestic violence. Community Action Partnership here, one of our partners runs the domestic violence services. Please, if that is a situation that you or someone you know is, reach out to them. If you don't know or need their number, you can call 211 to find out how to get there, or use Google or those types of things. So just wanted to mention that because it is an important issue, and during the pandemic, it has become an accelerated issue as well as these workforce conversations. So thank you for that indulgence. Now, I'm gonna bring in the conversation here. We're gonna try to keep it moving because we've got limited time and lots of voices, but I'm gonna have our friend here, the Silver Surfer, kick us off. Tom, before Val puts you out to pasture completely, you've got some time yet before you're done. What's your reaction there? What are you thinking from both your position, but maybe even some of that, like your own personal demographic? What does it mean to transfer to the next generation? How do we solve some of these challenges? And you're on mute, Tom. So I hate to be the young guy who teaches you technology.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I gotta go, man. But my own personal demographic, well stated, Kevin. Thank you for that subtlety. Anyway, for those that don't know, I have announced I'm retiring next June, which is the reference to my surfing in Valerie's slideshow presentation. Anyway, first of all, Valerie, I think you did a great job, and I think you captured extremely well. What I kind of would just add to the conversation is a little bit different perspective, because appropriately so, Valerie's comments were solely focused kind of on that worker and that unemployed person. I want to share a little bit of perspective, maybe from the broader business community, about the reality of the situation from their lens. So what I would invite to the conversation is a little bit further note on the demographics that Valerie went over. And the one that just strikes me more than anything is that by the research that was conducted by the Center for Regional Analysis, a part of EDC, they recently determined that Lancaster County has enough demographic growth over the next 10 years to provide employees for all the new jobs that will be created by companies in Lancaster County. So there's a match that we'll grow enough to meet those jobs. What that completely does not take into consideration is the fact that by a pace of 7 to 1, people are retiring from the workforce. 7 people leaving for every new job that's being created. And demographically, we will be able to fill those new jobs, but we do not have the people, period, to cover for those 7 retirees that are the other part of the equation. So from a company perspective, they're looking at just the raw demographics and the immediate need that they have for people, and for better or for worse, they can't wait for today's kindergartners to go through the school system with better training and career opportunities available to them to plug them in. They need to act now. And what I think that invites in a different maybe sense of urgency, and frankly, a hopefully less threatening conversation for our community, is the need to really assess automation much more aggressively, which means you're eliminating traditional positions, but you're freeing up the available workforce to fill the slots of those that are unable to automate. And we're kind of, it's another way of redistributing that's going to be a real challenge. And I think it's going to be a challenge for our system throughout. But I will tell you, reflective, Kevin, just and then I'll shut up, but reflective personally, when you said, my own personal views, the automation thing, always was a mixed bag. It was a bit of a threat in a lot of ways because of the people that would displace. There was a kind of almost inhumanity about it at times. Yet, I think we're in a position now that if companies don't find a way to automate, they simply will not be able to survive in Lancaster County. And we need to be much more thoughtful about ways in which we can be promoting that as part of the broader challenge to workforce.
So that's helpful. And Selena, I see you nodding your head, and I'm wondering how that plays out in Armstrong, right? I mean, you're a international company, plants everywhere, you can move people, but what does that look like? That automation versus what historically would have been a very, very tangible manufacturing. I need the unique skill to provide here.
Right. I'm sure you saw me amening everything that Tom was saying there. Our industry, of course, manufacturing is at the top of the list. Valerie very much so displayed that well. It's a huge deal, right? Because we have all of these different manufacturing plants across the country. One of the biggest challenges is making sure that automation happens in time, right? We can't be behind the curve. We have to be before it. So with that said, there goes the opportunity to train people for the future. You're training them now to say, hey, how do we fill the gap, as Tom mentioned, for those that are retiring? You're already here. We need to put you on a progressive track to now give you new skills to meet the demands of the future. Those that are coming in, we also need to make sure that they are trained, and we're building these job descriptions now for the opportunity for transferable skill assessment, right? Not just what we've traditionally set those positions at, but now what can we do to help now say, this is where you are, but we can develop you to here to make sure that you are getting the skill. You are also getting the now living wage, or definitely above your current pay grade, and you're having the opportunity to progress. And we are moving into automation, or as we expressively call it at Armstrong, our digitalization age.
So, Brian, I know that at High Industries, you're sort of in this space where you can't automate welding a bridge together, right? I mean, so you're still within a similar type of work, manufacturing and construction, but with less of that sort of ability. But I know you also have skills gaps. And so I'm curious what you all are doing. I know for one, you're doing the welding program where you train people, but so what does that look like in your world?
Yeah, it's a great point, Kevin. I mean, and going back to what Tom had said about, that skills gap and succession planning, as we look forward, the amount of folks that we're going to have retiring from one of our business units like High Steel over the next 5 to 7 years is exponential. And replacing their skills is even more challenging. Now, thankfully, High invested several years ago in High Steel University, where we have the ability to bring folks in who might not have any welding experience or even manufacturing experience. And we give them the transferable skills to be effective in what we do. When you think about traditional welding, there's, you have stick welding and some of the other aspects of it. But given the DOT requirements of putting the welds to the certain standards of test, it's incredibly difficult to teach that in short order. We think about it from the perspective of about a 24-month turnaround time before somebody's really efficient in their job. Relative to automation, yeah, there's not a significant amount that we can do. However, we are investing a significant amount of money in some of the efficiency improvements that can help make those younger, inexperienced individuals effective a little bit sooner than that 24-month window.
Well, one of the places that High has invested in, I believe, is Tech Centro, right? You're a partner, supporter of Tech Centro. Marilyn, you invited me recently to come and visit your new space, Tech Centro West, there in the Southwest. And it was fantastic to see, particularly it was an HVAC class, I think, that we went into. And there were some individuals who were in jobs. I mean, there was a guy who was 19, and there was a gentleman who I think was in his 60s who was trying to transfer his skills. And there was a number of guys in between. And it was really interesting to hear how you all see yourselves as not the long-term final solution, but the solution from here to next. Can you talk about your part in this trajectory?
Absolutely. And before I do that, I want to give kudos to Valerie. I think she did a great job with this presentation. So as a board member of the Lancaster Workforce Development Board, it was very, very well presented. So congratulations, Pat. But yeah, absolutely, Kevin. For the last 7-8 years, Tech Centro had developed, a comprehensive workforce program. And I believe that really one size doesn't fit all, and that we have to really design programs that are comprehensive and really meet the needs of the people that we are serving. So putting Tech Central together, we try to develop in this holistic approach where we target every single barrier that they may have facing to a change of career or better employment. With these new classes that we are offering, you know, my mission and my goal is to ensure that our students go to this program, get skills or you know, learn new skills, and then secure a job, but also that they have some opportunities to continue in the pathway. So this is just one stop for them. They can move forward and continue increasing their skills as they want to. But my main goal is to ensure that they get a 6-7 months program and they can access to those jobs that really they don't have access because of the lack of skills. Another thing that I want to ensure is that we put this information out, or this message that equality is not equity. You know, there's two different things. And you know, for me, is providing that all the services, all the resources they need to resolve something. Is providing equal access, that's from the past. You know, that I don't think that's even word anymore. So having Tech Central is providing that opportunity that we are targeting each individual and meeting them where they are. And if it's providing any childcare services, working with different agencies like CAP, the Career Link, I-13. So we're trying really to provide this holistic approach where we help them, you know, moving through the process and securing their employment opportunities.
Thanks. So you just referenced CAP, right? So Vanessa, I mean, she mentioned childcare, she mentioned CAP, and obviously you do a whole bevy of connected services. I mean, how does sort of the CAP process play into this? And you know, we've heard from a couple different, you know, longer term, 24 months, and you've just heard 6 months training, and you've got people who are in it right now, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think such a complex issue because people are complex. And I think what this moment reminds us to do is to look at people in their whole selves, because we can't, and this is a conversation that we've been having with employers and with the chamber and with other folks about just this idea that part of our responsibility as employers, so CAP employs 350 people. Part of my job is to make sure that I don't have an experience for my customers that I don't have for my staff. And that means ensuring that we're thinking about all the things that get in the way of them being effective and available and ready for work. So one space for me is really engaging and encouraging employers to think about ways that they can get more creative in partnering with those of us who provide those supports, because ultimately it's a retention strategy, right? We want to make sure that we have folks in the jobs who can be part of that succession planning or that growth plan, but how do we wrap around support and really get clear about what's in the way? So when you talk about childcare, Kevin, it's interesting. A lot of folks, childcare is such a significant thing that's happening right now. And what I'll say is that currently CAP is the countywide provider to provide childcare subsidy for working families who qualify for that subsidy. There is no wait list for that subsidy. So there's no wait list in Lancaster County or in Lebanon County for an individual who's either going to work or going to school who needs subsidy to go, you know, for childcare services. Where the wait list is happening, it's at the actual childcare facility. So the state recently did some surveying, and you know, this childcare shortage, just to give you a few data points, there's about 25,000 kids on a childcare waiting list for a center, family-based, center-based, just trying to get in. The challenge is that segment and workforce is also understaffed. So, you know, we are required to maintain ratios in order to support kids in a healthy and appropriate way, and to make sure that they have a high quality experience. And we just can't do that without the staff there. So between a shortage in staff and we're required as a licensed provider, so CAP serves about 1,000 kids in early childhood in our county. We have about 45 different locations and classrooms and 4 different childcare centers. When we have a COVID exposure, there's a 14-day window when that classroom or that teacher or that student has to be out of that space, which really does, the triple effect to working families is so significant. So, you know, we're navigating through workforce challenges, these barriers, a lack of people, but also, you know, we're adding COVID because COVID's still a real thing. And it really is impacting our early childhood professionals. I would also say that as we think about what's living wage and how do we really invest in professionals, I don't know how we don't invest more in early childhood professionals. Something that CAP's working on, we're trying to get ahead of it and be better at it in terms of salary and benefits and all the things that they deserve to do that work. But I would also invite an invitation to the other employers, the private sector, to think about the creative ways that maybe they can help meet and subsidize some of those innovative approaches around how we staff. And that's the work that CAP is really interested in helping to navigate. We've been doing that with some of the partners around the table. We've got to figure out ways to, I think, share the burden. Oftentimes I remember being, front staff worker and thinking about like, I've got to come to work with all the soft skills and all the hard skills. I got to have all my stuff together. I got to know how to do the job. I got to have the techno piece, and then I got to have my childcare together, and I got to have my transportation fixed out and all those things. And I just wonder if there's an invitation to the private sector to say, hey, how do we create a more community-centric workplace where we invest in the well-being of the employer and the employee, and we do that in partnership with one another?
Yeah, so I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. My 4-year-old is in one of these Lancaster City sort of corner house. It's registered, it's Keystone Stars and all that stuff. And, we pay a lower amount than we would be able to because they won't take more. Like I've tried to pay more. She's like, no, everybody has to pay the same, right? So at the end of the year, like Christmas, we just give like a big check. We're like, it's a Christmas bonus, don't give it back, right? But having to think about how the structures sometimes limit the way that we even want to sort of be better and do better. At the same time, my daughter, my 7-year-old is at King Elementary, King Pride, with the school district of Lancaster. She had strep throat the other week, had to stay out of school for a week. Has an allergic reaction to amoxicillin, has to stay out of school for a week because she was itchy and whatever. And then she gets contact traced and she's out of school for another week, right? I run the United Way. I make the rules around work remote, how you can support. We had another staff member a couple of weeks ago, same thing. Not every workforce has that. My wife also can work remotely. I was just like, if I had a job that was not able to support this, I just lost my job.
Yeah.
I literally just lost my job, or I left a 7-year-old at home for 3 straight weeks by themselves. So my daughter is in King, and King, I'll say, Dr. Bell was very supportive. She happens to be in an IEP program, so that helped even more to be able to keep her going and keeping up. So commendments are due to King. But Damaris, you're the foundation. I mean, it was referenced earlier, right? We can't wait for 12 years for a kindergartner, but we can wait maybe 1 or 2 for a high schooler. So how do you think about workforce in regards to education, and that you are literally today dealing with the preparation of the workforce for the next 12 years, basically 15 years?
Right. Thank you, Kevin. So we are fortunate in Lancaster County that we have the Lancaster County CTC Center, which is really skill-based, right? So those kids who want to take welding and other construction programs can do it there, but the school district of Lancaster has also its own, because we know that skills to get into jobs is more than just one organization can offer, our CTC, for example. So we are duplicating many of those courses because of the demand. And so we are very aware of the demand, the skills that employers need. And so really reviewing what are the courses we're offering, do they meet the workforce demands of the future? So we're doing some of that. The other thing we're trying to do is to build our own. So in terms of childcare, right? Right now we have spaces in all of our pre-K programs. However, our pre-K program is a school day, not a work day. So trying to get organizations to partner with us to take those babies after school. Many organizations don't do that, right? So that is a real problem for our families in terms of helping them get employed. We are able, because of the COVID funds, ESSER funds from the federal government, now we are actually providing full-time after-school courses for students, for And I'm talking about the little ones who can't stay home by themselves. Typically, we didn't have enough funding to have it 5 days a week. Now we do. So that, I believe, is helping families. At least you know your school-age children are in a safe place so families can go to work. Unfortunately, when a child gets sick like yours, Kevin, there's not much. But you could have your child in our Cyber Pathways program, by the way.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, so the other thing that we're doing that we think is really important, as I said, is really growing our own. So trying to get our paraprofessionals to go back to school with our support to become teachers, because we have a lot of vacancies and we cannot automate, right? You need a teacher in the room, not a robot in the room. We've learned that virtual instruction was not very successful for students. Teachers didn't like it. You don't have that relationship building, which is so important in a educational environment. So we are working to really support our own staff in growing into that next level of employment. So we're really excited about that because, I mean, right now we have 56 paraprofessional and other support staff positions. We have 23 teaching positions still open. So we have learned that we just have to grow our own, and we're partnering with Millersville University, for example, to get more students to become teachers. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, the conversation is a lot around business needs and employment, but school districts also have significant needs for employees as well.
And I've seen your billboards. I mentioned this earlier, Damaris. I've seen your billboards, and they say, make a difference. And it makes me think about how we in the nonprofit sector advertise. One of the differences for you versus us, though, is if we can figure out better ways as a society, like Vanessa talked about, how do we all share this burden to give schools fairer funding? Like we had that conversation, but just even more funding across the board. Like in a nonprofit, it's like I can't just sort of I need to go and raise money to increase wages. It's a little bit different, but the school systems, if we can get new better budgets, that would be one component to being able to have, I drove recently down south and I passed billboards in 3 consecutive school districts, all advertising school bus drivers, and they were different wages. And these are, one was $2 more than the first one, right? So just how do we get to a place where we're not just fighting? And so, this is a great segue into our, I feel like the pace car in NASCAR. I'm about to let go here because now we've brought everybody in and it's great into Scott here. So, Dr. Rao just talked about having 50 some positions opening from teaching to paraprofessionals, right? So we're talking skills, training, certifications, and we're talking less than that, right? What are you seeing? You're president of a staffing agency. What are you seeing as the barriers, maybe a little bit from the worker side, as well as the employment side, the employer side?
Well, it's kind of nice to go last because I have all these notes I've made about comments other folks have made. And first, Selena, welcome to Lancaster. We're happy to have you here. When I look at our average wage, believe it or not, year over year, our wages, our pay rates to our temporary employees have risen almost 16%. That is probably one of the bigger barriers I see clients have. Our clients that are willing to raise their rates, raise their pay rates, are attracting some candidates. Probably not as many as they'd like, but they're attracting some candidates. Our clients who are willing to be flexible in the times that people work. I heard about childcare. I heard about flexibility. I think companies need to look at staffing and scheduling differently today. The world has changed. And one of the first things I think you should ask a good candidate is, when do you want to work? Because a single mom might need to get a kid out of the house and can show up at 9, work till maybe 3, get that kid home, get dinner done, and maybe put in a couple hours in the evening. I think the companies that we see that are open to that are attracting better candidates. Automation is huge. I went to our industry's convention a couple of weeks ago, and there were two main themes. One was automation, and one was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I heard some great speakers talk about if you don't have a DEI plan for recruiting and retention, you're the company that's going to be left behind. So my two priorities for the upcoming year, probably 3 years, are automation and DE&I. Companies need to learn how to recruit a fully qualified and fully diverse candidate pool. Companies need to stop saying, "Well, I put an ad in the paper and I only got three candidates and they're all white." Well, you didn't try hard enough. You know, you got to figure out where you can go to increase your candidate pool. If you don't, you're not going to make it. And the end of the day, the candidates are driving the market. You know, often we get job descriptions from clients, and I'll see things like college degree required. And if I look at that job description, it really doesn't require a college degree. Think about what you're asking, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years experience. Why 3 or 4 years? Why not 2? Why not 8? Companies need to understand they're on the buying side today. And, you know, candidates are going to have multiple offers. We see it all the time. I try to scold my clients often, and when I hear, "Oh, we just interviewed Jane and she was great, but I want to see 2 or 3 other candidates," and you know, my blood boils, because it's hard enough to find one candidate, let alone 2 or 3 more. And by the time we find the 2 or 3 more, the first one's gone, and that's the one they want. And I see everybody shaking their head. You know, so the more flexible we can be, the more focused on the complete pool of candidates, and the more effort you put into that as a company, the better pool of candidates you'll attract. And Damaris, I made one note for you. You know, you talked about you can't automate teaching. You can't, but you can probably automate other processes within your organization. And those things that you automate could free up resources and other things to help you attract a better pool of candidate. The stuff that we've seen in our industry as far as automation and artificial intelligence is just fascinating. And that's going to change the type of worker we need. So I don't know if I answered your question, Kevin, because I just talked about what I want to talk about.
No, it's helpful. It's helpful. Yeah, exactly. It's why you're invited. It's helpful. You open it up, and I'm going to mention one thing and then step out of the way, which is you mentioned DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for those who may not know that parlance. And I just want to publicly thank Tristar, who gave us a significant contribution towards Project Blueprint at United Way, which is a program that we're relaunching here at the beginning of the year. This week, we just hired our first director of equity, and Project Blueprint provides training for underrepresented individuals, largely people of color, but also maybe someone returning from incarceration or someone living with a disability, on how to serve in leadership positions, particularly in boards of organizations. That will be different. We used to do it, will be different than before, but looking forward to a Q1 launch for that. I just wanted to thank you for that, and say that for those of us who are in this work, we may be thinking about that internally, which we need to, but how are we also contributing to those outside of us, being part of a trajectory of success? And so the thing I'll also take from what you said, Scott, is you said it's a buyer's market, or workers sort of market, that employers are having to be the buyer, not the seller in the same way. And we see around society, for the first time in a long time, organization, whether it is organized labor, very explicitly, or informal organization of individuals in the labor market. And I want to sort of open that, because we don't have a labor representative here directly, but I'm curious, you know, Selena, you know, I know that you all have a mixed shop. Dr. Rao, the school district, you've got some various unions there. Brian, I'm pretty sure High is not a union shop. So how, and Vanessa, I'm not even sure. You have so many different spaces, but I'm just curious about that sort of point about how worker power is higher than it's been before? And how are you feeling that in various ways? And Tom, you do as well, maybe.
Yeah, I could speak to that. It's interesting because I think 2 weeks ago I had that exact experience with a manager. We were talking about hiring an administrative position, and they had the very, very, very strict viewpoint of, no, I need them in the office every day. They have to be here. And when I interview, that's the first thing I ask, what is your availability? And I just feel I'm in the company for the question, why? Why does that make sense to you? What exactly is on this job description that says this person has to see you face to face every day? So, not that position itself is the point, but I think the training of managers, how we've always looked at things, how we view people and their needs, to Vanessa's point. This is a human in this position, and what is going on that they can still work this position and we can make this happen, right? So I think a big piece of it is retraining at a leadership level. How do we look at this and what is the scope of it? Because we're going to lose in the market, to Scott's point, if we are not reframing the job descriptions, how we think of this as interviewers, and how we think of other humans and their needs.
Yeah, Selena, I think it's a great point. It's something that we really battled with in the early stages of COVID. Having 11 different businesses under the High umbrella, and you think about a company like High Steel Structures, you can't weld a bridge remotely, right? You can't do it from home. But how do you work through that? Communication to those folks out on the production-based floor that, hey, everybody's not going to be in the office and they're going to be able to perform their role remotely while you're still here physically present. It was a significant amount of work that we had to do, and fortunately we had strong leadership teams and HR business partners that were able to help lead that discussion. But that flexibility for candidates, especially in the more professional-based roles, has to be there. Otherwise, we're going to lose out on opportunities for great skill sets that could really help take our businesses to the next level.
Yeah, and I would say, I think it's something that, we've got to explore is how do we train frontline managers around understanding some of the complexities of what it is for families who are living in a low income situation. So it's one of the things that we had done actually, Brian, with High Concrete in Denver, was this idea of like, let's talk about what poverty in context means. Let's talk about what some of the behaviors that you see and how you can support and approach leadership differently with more empathy and more understanding, so that there's a tension point between those two things. I think, Selena, to your point of like someone who wants, I want to see you in the office behind your desk by 8 o'clock, right? And that's about a management practice that we have to help people evolve around. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to think about how some of us who are in this, community benefit sector can help provide some education and support for those folks who are kind of the frontline manager, supervisor, director, leader, to better understand what it means to support someone, and how they can be more flexible and creative around those policies and practices that, are kind of part of an organization's culture. But it does start with the leadership of an organization. That leadership has to be in tune and really clear about what equity means and what behaviors are seen in the organization when we say we're an organization that's focused on equity, because there are behaviors that align to that. If not, it's just talk, right?
So I would also add that, so the pandemic and closing down the state and all of that did have a silver lining in terms of forcing school systems to ramp up their use of technology for both instruction, but also for the work. So we are much more flexible in terms of our central office people who can do the same work from home. But I'll push back on Scott. You cannot have classrooms with robots. You need flesh and blood teachers there, because what we learned from the pandemic is that kids totally disengaged when it was full online learning. And so one of the, again, silver linings is we may offer a couple of classes now that we couldn't offer ever before. For example, we may have kids interested in Chinese. So we don't have a teacher for Chinese, but we certainly can buy a computer program for Chinese and have an adult available to support kids. But yeah, automation has definitely increased. The ability to work from home has definitely increased for certain staff. But we do believe that it is important for our kids to have relationships in schools. And so the teaching staff is not something we would want to automate in any way, because there were lots of losses related to that for kids. And I'm not just talking about little kids. For me, the big kids, the teens, suffered even more from not being in classrooms. So I agree with everything everyone is saying. But I think, again, we need to be cognizant of how do we create those structures to get more people, especially people of color, into classrooms and providing them the financial support. So one of the things we are trying to do is, if a paraprofessional is interested in going into teaching, helping them with tuition, giving them the laptop, providing them with an opportunity to do student teaching during their workday. Because if you're just student teaching, you're not getting paid. So what we've been able to develop is, yes, you're going to continue to work, you're going to continue to get your benefits, and you're still going to get those hours for student teaching. So yeah, definitely having to be more flexible to keep and recruit employees.
So we're going to switch over here and break our arms in just a minute to keep on time. But I'm open to a couple more comments here, but we'll want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or less to get to that breakout rooms.
Dr. Rao, I didn't mean to say teachers would be automated. I don't want robot teachers either. My point was, as we automate more within the organization, it'll free up resources for in-person teaching.
So where we can automate allows us to have more resources to better pay or support in areas that we can't.
Right.
You know, Kevin, I know there's a lot of nonprofit organizations on this call, and I think that I'm just going to throw this one out there before if I don't get a chance at the end, but if it's not clear, business community in general is desperate for rethinking the way they manage workforce. They're desperate in reaching the available workforce. They're desperate in creative programs that are needed to retain and grow their workforce. They're just desperate. And as a nonprofit on the call, I would really invite you to think creatively, and now is the time to reach out to businesses and say, what can we do to help? What's the opportunity here? I think ultimately, you know, we can sit in the lament of where we are, but we do need to get to solutions. And I think the solutions are going to rest not at some federal program or state program, or frankly, even a countywide coordinated program, although we're trying to align that better. But I do think it's the partnerships that can be established to create better networks and opportunities for everybody that's going to be ultimately the answer at the kind of micro level. And I would just encourage everybody to kind of rethink themselves as to how they can be a part of the solution.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead.
I was going to say quick, I think, Tom, that's so important, kind of Adam Grant-esque, right? This idea of thinking again. But I also would encourage us to be okay to pilot something that isn't huge. Like maybe it's small and it's one or two organizations. Let's learn and share our learnings and scale and continue to reiterate the process, because I think that organic approach is going to be the most impactful for this community.
And that we learn in failure. This is a thing that is often difficult for people. And this is the value of that small pilot, right? Success may actually be that the pilot failed, because now we know what not to do and maybe a couple of things to bring back in the next one. And Tom, I appreciate the wisdom. I felt you speaking to me directly there. Kevin, get out there and make some solutions.
Actually, Kevin, I didn't mean you, but that's beside the point.
But we heard Vanessa already sort of identifying this, right? You know, I've mentioned that sort of Project Blueprint sort of fits in this. Marilyn Barbosa's whole existence as an organization is this. And I would, what I would summate what you're talking about, Tom, is I've often said the nonprofit sector, both, and this is good and bad, but the nonprofit sector often exists where neither government nor business can solve a problem. And they either don't want to or can't, or whatever the case may be. And so this is a time we often try to contract the nonprofit sector, get rid of nonprofits. We want less. But the reality is that nonprofits always crop up where there are, when and where there are problems. And we're in the middle of a pandemic. So, you know, for those of you out there who are listening to this or may see this, and you've got an entrepreneurial idea, it doesn't only have to exist as a for-profit Silicon Valley tech startup. If you've got an idea on how you can help solve this problem, and you could do that in a space where, you know, the structures of a nonprofit, which is a business, we sometimes forget, nonprofits are businesses too. It's just a tax structure where having those tax deductible, you know, donations from these partner organizations, you can solve a problem. We need entrepreneurial spirit within the nonprofit sector as much as we do in the for-profit sector. And so that's just an invitation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hop over to some breakouts. It's going to be randomly assigned. You may be in the room with Tom Baldridge or Vanessa or both of them. So we're going to randomly assign these breakouts, and then we'll bring everybody back at about 11:20. But we want to hear your voices. So it's not just a little bit of time with Scott indirectly. We want you to contribute, and then we'll come back and we'll recap here a little bit at about 11:20. So everybody, thank you. And feel free to turn on your video and unmute yourselves as you enter the breakout room. And feel free to leave your cameras on because we're not going to go back to just the panels. But we have just about 10, 12 minutes left here. And so I'm curious if people have, and what I'd be glad to do is if you want to just press the reaction button, and I'll call on individuals. If you have anything that you heard or themes or something that really interests you in that breakout room to bring back into this larger group. I will mention the first thing I'll just say in my group, Anna Kennedy talked about her organization, which is a nonprofit, looking at creating some solutions to barriers that they see directly because of the pandemic. And so to Tom's earlier comment about that, the innovation in the sector, I'm curious what others had to share or heard. Go ahead, Michelle Salinas.
One of the things we were talking about was when we talked about the job, right? The job descriptions and figuring out what really you need for that job is another thing. As I was suffering in my job, my company, I worked for the census, but I looked at jobs, and I will be honest, when I saw 2 lists of job responsibilities for the amount of pay or the time, I thought, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work. And I think that's another thing in the job description. What are the top 10 things you need? Like, don't make it 50 things, because it's not that you can't add work once they're there and you see what they're capable of, but even adults have low self-esteem in what they think they're capable of. And as much as I'm educated and I've been around for a while, I look those long lists, I'm like, that's a lot. And so I think if you lessen the list, I mean, like I hired someone full-time and I just did it for scheduling, but guess what? She does a lot more now because as she learned the job and I felt more confident, she felt more confident in herself. And I think that's another thing to look at for job descriptions.
Thanks. Yeah. I like that. In an ideal world, I like to create a job description if I have the resources and hire only for 75% of a job and say, when you get here, what's the 25% that you brought I didn't even know about? Can we build a program? Can we build opportunity around you? You don't always have the resources for that. You're trying to fill holes, but given in an ideal world, can you hire not filled to the brim with the capacity of the job from go, right?
That's a great point, Kevin. If I could comment on that real fast. I think we're always, as companies, saying we want innovation, we want new ideas, but we write this long job description of everything we want the person to do versus bring. And I think that's a wonderful thing that you all were discussing prior, because that's a huge thing. And I'm always looking at job descriptions and saying, okay, now what 8 things can you take off of here? Yeah.
Absolutely, Selena. I mean, one of the things that I think we do really well here at High, and I'm excited to see a couple of our business partners on this call, is individual development plans, right? So in a collaboration between the manager and that coworker, sit down and say, all right, what are some stretch goal opportunities that they might go 12 months, they might go, longer than that, or a shorter duration, to help get you to that next level from a step progression standpoint, and really work through that diligently to get that coworker to the next level. Oftentimes there's a stigma when a coworker hears individual development plan, they think, oh my God, am I going to be worked out of the organization? And no, it's absolutely the opposite. We're investing in your skill set.
You know, Brian, training is so important and everybody's investing in that. And to your point, Selena, I challenge every employer out there to stop saying candidates are overqualified. Here you've heard two big companies talk about training, and I can't tell you how many times we present a candidate and hear from a client that, oh, I'm not hiring them, they're overqualified. Well, what the heck do you want them to forget? I mean, they can bring so much value to your organization. Flush that thing, especially today where people may be moving into an industry that's different than where they came from. The experience they have could be very valuable. So ask them, when someone says they're overqualified or one of your frontline managers says that, our response has become, well, tell me what you want them to forget, and they will.
Scott, I often say to my hiring teams here and other places I've been is, it's not our job to say no to someone. You know, this is what we can offer. Boy, we wish it was more. This is what we can offer. This is what we're asking. If you want to come and say yes to that, why am I going to say no? Why'd I bother to put the job out there if a qualified or overqualified, to use that word, person? And then Brian, you know, I like to think about how we've structurally screwed up our system, right? So the individual development plan is seen as negative. Why do we use the term write up? I wish it was write down so that we could write people up and proactively praise them when they do well, right? What does it mean to give positive reinforcement in the environment as well?
Yeah, I would say too, I would just, Brian, when you were talking and Selena, when you were speaking, I was really thinking about this, how we recalibrate our thoughts about succession planning, that it shouldn't be when like the senior person's retiring. So like we have a practice in our organization that we are looking for 3 candidates to fill every leadership role on our team. Doesn't mean that actual vacancy is even in the horizon, but it helps us to become really intentional about developing those folks. And if that means that they leave CAP, that's okay. That means we've invested in a more qualified, more competent, more passionate professional that's in our community. And that's totally fine. But it's something that we're trying to get more clear about. It's like 5 core functions of a job. What are the behaviors, attributes? And then if we can identify like who's emerging, are we noticing that? How do we have that conversation? Because it's another way that people feel invested in, even if you can't pay them more. But if they notice that you're noticing them and that you see potential and you're willing to skill up that potential, I think there's lots of retention benefits to that approach.
Yeah, it's something we go through on an annual basis. We do a 9-box skills assessment and leadership development pipelining process. And, you know, what it does, we have the added luxury where with 11 different business units, we can take somebody and move them across business units because they are emerging talent. Maybe there is a blocker in place relative to, you know, somebody not being in their retirement window, so forth. I mean, I think about some of our success stories that we have here. There's a gentleman, John McCormick, who runs our structured care division out of High Concrete as a general manager. He was a finance controller, right? And he was identified as having high potential, high skill, and he's running a very successful business now in structured care as a general manager. So being able to go through that on an annual basis and really look for that talent is significant.
And if I could just have one more plug, I guess, because I am the D&I person in the room, I think it's also important for the companies when we're thinking about these successor plans, because of course, Armstrong does the same, is in our efforts for seeking as well as filling positions that we have in thinking of diversity and inclusion, going beyond our metrics, right? I think that's a goal that we're making sure we do at Armstrong is, here's where we are, right? Let's say if we targeted that we want to increase by 16%, make that now 25. You know, it's like, let's go beyond that so that we can have the purposeful effort of making sure the underrepresented are now presented or represented in these workforces.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm going to mention about DEI is that although the non-white numbers in Lancaster are growing and non-white, non-Hispanic is like 86% now. If every company and employer wants to have a more diversified workforce, right, there's just not enough bodies for that to happen. So that means recruiting from outside of Lancaster, one, but that means that making sure that Lancaster, this is beyond what the workforce can necessarily do, is a place that people of color feel comfortable, safe, and willing to stay in. Right. And so we've got to think about that part of the environment as well. And then we also have to train those who are here to stay. Our retention programs for people of color need to be very explicit and intentional and well-grounded, because we need to keep those individuals. We all know that diversity is a strength. And so we've got to be very intentional about that, and be okay with the fact that your workforce today isn't where you want it to be. That doesn't mean you just give up, but it's okay. Are you building strategies? Do you have plans? And frankly, diversity is more than just racial diversity. Who are the people who have disabilities in your community who bring that part of themselves? Women are still an underrepresented and underpaid part of the workforce. Individuals who have other structural challenges. So when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I invite us to not think of it as racial diversity, racial equity, and racial inclusion, right? That is an incredibly important part of that and is historically the most underrepresented. We heard in our group from an individual who works with Native populations, which we often don't think about in these conversations. So I'm gonna pull us here just because it's 11:27 and want to keep us on time. I know that you all are busy. I really enjoyed today's conversation. I'm really grateful, Val, for your presentation, which got us set off. Our panelists, what I heard in the room, in my breakout room, and what it sounds like some engaging conversations here. Thank you so much for all of you for participating. You registered, so you will get the recording. Please feel free to kick it to your staff, to your hiring teams, friends, organizations that you know. We'll continue to have some of these conversations broadly about our community conversations. We try to target them once a month on different topics. I think that we'll probably be returning to workforce sooner rather than later. As Val talked about, there's a lot of rabbit holes that we can go down on this. And so thank you all, panelists, for your time and your expertise, individuals for participating. We are United Way of Lancaster County. We are a nonprofit. We always are grateful for any financial contributions and support that you can make, whether that's today directly or Extraordinary Give coming up. There were a lot of other organizations represented today. Think about how you can support them and their good work. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your energy. Take care.